picture this. It's 6:00 a.m.
Oh, boy.
Your alarm goes off.
Yeah.
It is completely pitch black outside. You know for a fact that the floor is just
It's
freeze.
the worst feeling.
Right. You're staring up at the ceiling, and you are actively doing the mental math of, like, how fast you can shower if you just sleep for 9 more minutes.
It is the daily, universal negotiation, and we almost always lose.
Every single time. Because you know you should get up. You have these massive goals. You know you want to get fit. You want to write that book. You want to finally start that side business.
You went to bed totally fired up about it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But in that specific moment, at 6 a.m., your blanket, it is so warm it feels like a literal hug from the universe. So you reach over and you hit snooze. Just 5 minutes, you tell yourself.
Which is, the biggest lie we ever tell ourselves.
The ultimate lie. So I have to ask you, sitting there listening to this right now, have you ever felt like you were sitting on an absolute gold mine of potential, but you just cannot seem to get out of your own way?
I think if we're being honest, everyone's hand just went up.
Right. And that is exactly why we are here today. Welcome to the Deep Dive. We are taking a magnifying glass to the actual mechanics of self-mastery today.
And we've got a fantastic stack of source material for this.
We really do. We're primarily focusing on the architectural framework of Sheldon Howe. So we're looking at his foundational book, How to Be Disciplined, pulling in some really wild insights from his work on discipline and mental strength, and even looking at how this applies to leadership from his book, How to Be a Great Boss.
And before we get into the weeds here, we really have to address the elephant in the room.
We do.
We need to completely shatter a massive misconception right out of the gate. Because when most people hear the word discipline, they flinch. They physically recoil.
Oh, absolutely. Because it sounds like a punishment.
Right.
It sounds like a word a strict school principal yells down a hallway while you're chewing gum. It feels like a cage.
It does.
It feels like you're willingly giving up all the fun in your life to become this miserable, hyper-optimized robot.
But here is the crazy part. What if the exact thing you have been avoiding, this seemingly rigid, boring concept of discipline, is the only thing that will actually give you your weekends back?
Okay, now you have my attention.
Right. Howe's entire framework takes that idea of a cage and just turns it completely inside out. Discipline is not a punishment. It is, counterintuitively, the ultimate shortcut to freedom.
I love that framing because I desperately want my weekends back. And, I want to stop waking up feeling guilty all the time. So let's actually trace this. Let's look at the anatomy of why we fail. And more importantly, the specific, biological and psychological tools we can use to fix it.
Let's do it.
And to do this, let's go back to that snooze button struggle. Because why do we hit it in the first place? Usually it's because we're lying there in the dark, just waiting for motivation to suddenly strike us like lightning.
Which is the most dangerous trap you can possibly fall into.
Yeah.
Waiting for motivation is like waiting for the weather to be perfect before you start building a house. You are going to be waiting a very, very long time.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
There is a story in the source material that perfectly illustrates this, and I kind of want to use it as our anchor today.
The guy in the apartment.
Yes. Let's call him Kevin.
Yeah.
So Kevin is living alone in a tiny, cramped apartment. It's one of those places where the radiator just clanks all night long.
We've all lived there.
We have.
Yeah.
And he has a job that is just, okay, it pays the bills, but he feels completely stagnant. He knows he is capable of so much more, but he's just totally stuck in neutral.
We have all been at that exact plateau. You feel the gap between who you are and who you know you could be, and it physically aches.
Yes. So one cold winter evening, Kevin is sitting on his couch, aimlessly scrolling on his phone, watching other people live these incredible lives, and he gets this sudden, massive burst of inspiration.
Oh, here we go.
He decides, that's it. I am taking control. I'm going to completely change my life.
Yeah.
He sets his alarm for 5 a.m. He's going to wake up, go jogging in the freezing cold, read a chapter of a business book, and just conquer the world.
The legendary 2.0 a.m. burst of motivation.
It's so real.
It is, but it is actually a very specific neurochemical trick the brain plays on you.
Wait, really? It's a trick?
Absolutely. When Kevin makes that grand plan at 2 a.m., his brain actually releases a massive surge of dopamine.
But he hasn't done anything yet.
Exactly. Dopamine isn't just the reward chemical, it's the anticipation chemical. His brain rewards him just for imagining being that successful, disciplined guy.
No way.
Yeah, he gets all the chemical benefits of having run the 5 miles without having to take a single step off the couch.
That is wild. So it feels like you've already achieved the goal just by setting the alarm.
Exactly.
But then reality hits. The sun isn't even considering coming up. The alarm blares at 5 a.m. and Kevin, he immediately hits the snooze button. Just 5 more minutes, he mumbles.
And we know how that ends.
Right. Those 5 minutes turned into an hour and a half. He wakes up at 7:30 a.m., looks at the clock, realizes he's late for his mediocre job, and he is just furious with himself. The motivation completely vanished the exact second his feet hit the cold floor.
And this highlights Howe's core philosophy perfectly. Motivation is a spark.
Okay.
Sparks are great. They look pretty. They can start a fire. But a spark is a terrible engine. It abandons you the moment it starts raining, the moment you are tired, or, the moment a task gets boring.
It's total unreliable.
Right. Discipline, on the other hand, is the engine. It runs whether you feel like it or not.
So if the spark is useless for the long haul, how do we actually build the engine? Like, where does Kevin even start when he gets home that night, feeling like a complete failure?
He has to start internally with what Howe calls the identity shift.
The identity shift.
Yeah. Before you change your schedule, you have to fundamentally change how you view yourself. Howe has a strict rule for this. He says, be before you do.
Okay, I have to push back on this a little bit because before you do sounds like something you'd see printed on a sunset poster in a dentist's office.
Fair enough.
Like, are we just supposed to look in the mirror and lie to ourselves?
Yeah.
Do I stand there eating a powdered donut and just say, I am a highly disciplined, elite athlete?
It sounds a bit like toxic positivity when you phrase it like that.
A little bit.
But it is actually grounded in hard cognitive psychology. It's about cognitive dissonance.
Okay, unpack that.
The human brain despises being a hypocrite. It wants your actions to align with your internal self-image. If you view yourself as a lazy person who just naturally struggles with mornings, your brain will subconsciously look for ways to prove that identity true.
Oh, wow. So the brain essentially says, hey, we are lazy person, so it makes total sense that we are hitting snooze. This is just who we are.
Precisely. You will act lazy because you believe that is your fundamental nature. You are fulfilling your own prophecy.
That's terrifying.
It is. So you must adopt the new identity first. And you don't do this by just chanting mantras in the mirror. You do it by casting micro votes for that new identity.
Micro votes. I really like that. So it's not about delusional thinking. It's about proving it to yourself with tiny actions.
Exactly. If you want to identify as a writer, you don't need to write a 400-page manuscript today.
Right.
You sit down and write one single paragraph. That's it. If you want to identify as an athlete, you do one push-up. You are slowly reprogramming the brain with undeniable micro-evidence that matches the new identity.
You are leaving a trail of breadcrumbs for your brain to follow. Look, I did a push-up, therefore I must be the kind of person who works out.
Right. The actions, no matter how laughably small, validate the new identity. It removes the friction.
Okay, so Kevin is sitting in his apartment, the radiator is clanking, and he decides he is no longer stagnant Kevin. He makes the shift. He is now disciplined Kevin.
There we go.
And he proves it by washing the single coffee mug in his sink. Microvote cast. But where does he go from there? Because you can't just run blindly out the front door with a new identity. You need actual scaffolding.
You absolutely do. If the identity shift is the foundation, Howe provides the structural blueprints to build the house. He breaks this down into 3 pillars: purpose, plan, and practice.
The 3P formula. Let's pull those apart because they sound simple, but the mechanics behind them are fascinating. Let's start with purpose.
Purpose is your motivational anchor. It is the absolute bedrock of why you are doing this. And here's where most people fail. Their why is far too shallow.
Right. Kevin's original purpose was probably just, I want to be rich, or I want to look good at the beach.
And when it is 5:15 a.m. and the room is freezing, looking good at the beach is not a strong enough biological incentive to get you out of a warm bed.
Not at all.
Your cognitive energy, your willpower, is a finite resource. It depletes incredibly fast when faced with discomfort. You need an emotional tether that is stronger than the biological urge to stay warm and conserve energy.
So a weak purpose is, I want to get fit. A strong, deeply anchored purpose would be, what? I want to have the stamina to play soccer with my future kids. Or I want to prove to myself that I can keep a promise I make to myself.
Exactly. It has to hit you in the gut. Without that emotional resonance, you will always succumb to the siren song of instant gratification.
Which brings us to the second pillar, plan. And I think this is where the source material gets incredibly sharp. Howe has this brilliant observation where he says, aimless activity is the primary precursor to procrastination.
It is a phenomenal insight into how the brain conserves energy.
Yeah.
If you sit down at your desk and you don't know exactly what you're supposed to be doing, your brain faces decision fatigue.
And the brain hates burning calories on making decisions,
Right.
So it just defaults to the path of least resistance.
Always. If the choice is between figure out how to launch a complex marketing campaign or open a new tab and scroll through the news, the brain will choose the news every single time because it requires zero cognitive load.
This was Kevin's exact problem. He would wake up and tell himself, I want to achieve something big today. But he never defined what big actually looked like. It was just this cloudy, intimidating concept hovering over him.
Ambiguity is the enemy of execution.
Ooh, say that again?
Ambiguity is the enemy of execution. A proper plan requires you to drag those cloudy concepts down to earth and define them by breaking them into daily, weekly, and monthly chunks.
It completely eliminates decision fatigue.
Yes, you don't wake up and negotiate with yourself about what to do. The plan already made the decision for you yesterday.
So for Kevin, the vague goal of get fit was translated into lose 15 pounds by August 1st. Be Smarter became complete module 1 of the digital marketing certification by Friday. He made them tangible, measurable realities.
Which naturally leads us to the final pillar, practice. Because having a plan doesn't mean anything if you don't execute it. Discipline is not a genetic gift that some people are born with and others aren't. It is a trainable skill. And like playing the piano or speaking a new language, it requires daily, deliberate repetition.
And here is where Kevin's story gets really interesting, and where the behavioral science totally geeked me out.
The whiteboard.
Yes. Kevin takes his newly defined daily goals and he buys a massive, obnoxious whiteboard. He mounts it right on the wall in his tiny apartment. Next to every single daily task, he draws a little square checkbox. And every single time he completes a task, no matter how small, he takes a thick red marker and physically ticks the box.
That is classic textbook behavioral habituation. He is leveraging deep neuroscience there.
I want to dig into this. Why does drawing a tiny line inside a tiny square feel so universally deeply satisfying? What is actually happening in the brain?
It comes back to dopamine, but in a functional way this time. It's called a reward prediction error. When Kevin sees the empty box, his brain anticipates the reward. When he physically takes the marker and checks it off, his brain releases a micro hit of dopamine. It's the brain's way of saying, yes, that was good, do that again.
So he is literally hacking his own neurochemistry?
He is. By making the completion of the task visual and physical, he is rewiring his neural pathways to associate the hard, boring act of discipline with a tangible feeling of pleasure and accomplishment.
He's turning his life into a video game where he is constantly leveling up. And over time, that consistency means he doesn't have to force it as much. The habit starts to carry itself.
Exactly. The neurological friction decreases. But here is the catch, and I know you're going to bring this up.
Oh, I'm definitely bringing this up. Because Kevin can have the best purpose in the world. He can have his giant whiteboard. He can be riding a wave of dopamine. But what happens when his environment is actively working against him?
Which it always is.
Right. We do not live in a vacuum.
Right.
We live in a digital ecosystem that employs thousands of behavioral psychologists whose sole job is to engineer ways to steal our attention.
It is an asymmetrical war. You are fighting against supercomputers designed to distract you. And that is why Howe transitions from these foundational theories into highly tactical, nonlinear defense mechanisms.
The tools.
Specifically, two tools, the focus map and the distraction ledger.
Let's start with the focus map because I have a personal vendetta against traditional to-do lists.
Oh, they're the worst.
They actually spike my anxiety. You write down 20 things on a legal pad, and it's just this long, flat, terrifying column of demands screaming at you. All the tasks look equal. Pay the mortgage looks exactly the same as buy more paper towels.
And that flat democratic structure is exactly why traditional lists fail. Your brain can't quickly differentiate the threat or importance level.
Right.
The focus map solves this by making the list spatial and visual. Imagine looking down at a target with concentric circles.
Like a dartboard.
Exactly like a dartboard. The very center circle, the absolute bullseye, is reserved for your critical, high-impact tasks. In productivity circles, this is often called eating the frogs.
Eating the frogs, meaning the big, ugly, intimidating tasks that you really don't want to do, but that will actually move the needle on your life.
Right. If you have to eat a live frog, it's best to do it first thing in the morning so you aren't dreading it all day. You put the frogs in the center of the map. The outer rings are reserved for the low-value administrative chores, answering routine emails, paying a bill, organizing your desktop.
Okay, I see why this works. By spatially prioritizing the tasks, you are massively reducing that cognitive load we talked about earlier.
Exactly.
You don't have to scan a list of 20 items and waste mental energy trying to decide what is most important. The map makes the hierarchy instantly obvious. Your eyes are drawn to the bullseye.
It creates instant clarity. But even with perfect clarity, you are still going to get distracted. You are human.
Unfortunately.
Which brings us to arguably the most powerful tool in Howe's entire arsenal, the distraction ledger.
Okay, the distraction ledger. Walk me through the mechanics of this because it sounds like homework.
It is a literal log. You keep a notepad next to your keyboard. Every single time you are interrupted or every time you find yourself suddenly off task during a deep work session, you write it down.
Every single time.
Every time. You log the time, what the distraction was, and most importantly, you categorize it as either an internal trigger or an external trigger.
Let's define those because the distinction is crucial.
An external trigger is environmental. It's your phone vibrating with a text, a notification popping up on your screen, a coworker physically walking up to your desk and tapping you on the shoulder.
It is something outside of you demanding your attention,
Right.
which are annoying, but pretty easy to identify.
Right.
But an internal trigger is much sneakier.
Much sneakier. An internal trigger is an emotional urge. It is a sudden spike of boredom, a wave of anxiety about an upcoming deadline, or a feeling of being overwhelmed by the task in front of you.
And what does the brain do?
Well, because those feelings are uncomfortable, your brain instantly seeks a pacifier. It seeks an escape route, which usually manifests as an overwhelming urge to open a new browser tab and check Twitter, or walk to the fridge for a snack.
Okay, but I have to play devil's advocate here.
Yeah.
If I am trying to focus on writing a proposal and I get distracted by an urge to check the news, isn't stopping what I'm doing to write down that I got distracted on a ledger? Just adding another distraction, it feels counterproductive.
It feels incredibly counterproductive in the micro moment, yes.
Ah,
But you aren't doing it to fix that specific work session. You are doing it for long-term pattern recognition. You are acting as an auditor of your own mind.
how does that play out in reality?
Let's say you review your ledger at the end of the week. You notice a glaring pattern.
Yeah.
Every single day, right around 3:00 p.m., you log an internal trigger of boredom fatigue, and you end up scrolling on Instagram for 20 minutes.
My brain would immediately say, wow, I have zero discipline. I am a failure.
But the ledger removes the morality from it. That is the genius of it. You haven't failed at being a good person. You have simply found a bug in your operating system.
Oh, I like that.
The data shows that your circadian rhythm causes an energy dip at 3:00 p.m., and your brain is desperately craving a dopamine hit to wake it back up.
Oh, man. So instead of swimming in guilt, I can look at it like a scientist. It's just a data point.
Exactly. It completely neutralizes the shame. Once you see the pattern objectively, you can engineer a fix. If 3:00 p.m. is the danger zone, you schedule a 10-minute brisk walk outside at 2:50 p.m. to preemptively give your brain the stimulation it needs without falling into the social media trap.
Kevin did a really aggressive version of this. He looked at his ledger and realized his phone was a catastrophic external trigger. It was just constantly buzzing.
So what did he do?
So he didn't rely on willpower. He relied on environmental design. He deleted every single non-essential app off his phone, and he used screen time settings to lock himself out of social media after 15 minutes a day.
That is the ultimate environmental lever. You don't try to resist the bad habit. You make the bad habit physically impossible to execute.
But he also used it for those sneaky internal triggers. The source material talks about how he had this deeply ingrained habit of eating a very specific sugary dessert, gulab jamun, every single day after lunch at the office cafeteria.
Oh yeah, the sugar crash loop.
It was a totally automatic zombie-like routine. He felt stressed from the morning, he craved sugar, he bought the dessert.
A classic internal trigger loop. Stress leads to a craving for comfort.
Right. But armed with this new mindset, the next time he was standing in the cafeteria line and saw the dessert, he didn't just grab it. He engaged the system.
He paused.
He paused, looked at the dessert, and asked himself one very specific, highly rational question. Will eating this bring me closer to my big goals, or will it take me further away?
That simple question is the essence of metacognitive awareness.
Metacognitive awareness.
It's thinking about your own thinking. By asking that question, he jolts his brain out of autopilot mode and forces his logical brain to evaluate the situation.
He shines a spotlight on the habit. And once you shine a light on it, the spell's kind of broken. So we have the focus map, we are analyzing our bugs with the distraction ledger, we are asking the hard
They're
questions.
building the framework.
Right. But this leads me to my biggest fear with all of this. How do we design this hyper-disciplined daily routine without turning into a miserable, scheduled robot? Because honestly, looking at Hal's outline for the perfect routine, I wanted to run away.
It is intense. The perfect routine he outlines involves waking up exactly at 5 a.m., exercising at precisely 6:15 a.m., and then working in these rigid Pomodoro blocks, 25 minutes of intense focus, followed by exactly 5 minutes of rest.
It reads like a syllabus for military boot camp.
It does. It feels brittle. Like if you sleep in until 5:10 a.m., the whole day is ruined. And Howe knows this. He knows that absolute rigidity is a fast track to burnout. So he introduces a crucial counterbalance to the perfect routine. He calls it structured flexibility.
Structured flexibility. That sounds like a corporate buzzword. It sounds like an oxymoron.
It does, but it is the secret sauce to making discipline sustainable over a lifetime. It is the understanding that a routine should be a framework that supports you, not a prison that confines you.
Give me an example.
Let's look back at Kevin because he actually fell face first into the trap of over-rigidity.
He really did.
Yeah.
He became so absolutely obsessed with checking the boxes on his wall chart, so obsessed with his 5 a.m. wake ups and his meal prep, that he completely isolated himself. He basically became a hermit.
Yeah.
And then one evening, his phone rings. It's his mother, and she is nearly in tears asking why she hasn't heard from him in weeks. His family was worried sick because he just vanished into his routine.
It is an incredibly common and tragic pitfall of self-improvement. People equate discipline solely with professional output or physical aesthetics, and they let the truly important things, their relationships, their mental health, completely wither on the vine.
And Kevin has this massive, gut-wrenching realization. He realizes that being disciplined in his career but negligent with his family means he is fundamentally failing.
It's a wake-up call.
So he hangs up the phone,
Yeah.
walks over to his giant whiteboard, and he adds a new permanent goal. Call parents every Sunday and schedule quality time. He starts scheduling his relationships with the exact same reverence he gives his workouts.
Which is brilliant. If something is truly important to your life's purpose, it belongs on the map. It gets scheduled.
Absolutely.
But structured flexibility goes beyond just scheduling everything. It also means developing the wisdom to know when to break your own rules gracefully.
Like the story with his friend Rahul. This was a great moment.
The movie tickets.
Yes. It's a Sunday night. Sunday night is Kevin's religiously guarded study hour for his digital marketing course. He never misses it. But Rahul calls him up out of the blue. Rahul has an extra ticket to see a movie they've both been dying to watch, and the showing is in an hour.
And Kevin hesitates. His brain is screaming, no, the whiteboard, the checkbox, the routine.
He almost tells Rahul no. He almost chooses the textbook over a core memory with his friend.
But in that moment, he exercises structured flexibility. He realizes that a routine that cannot adapt to the spontaneous joys of life is not a routine, it's a pathology. If your discipline makes you resentful and lonely, it will eventually shatter.
So he says yes. He goes to the movie with Rahul. They have a great time. And the most important part, the sky doesn't fall.
Right.
His goals don't spontaneously combust. He just comes home, adjusts his schedule, and studies for an extra hour on Monday to make up for it. The framework flexed, but it didn't break.
That is the true mastery of the system. Now, to actually build this robust framework without triggering massive overwhelm on day one, Howe emphasizes a concept called habit engineering. And this relies on two primary mechanics, micro steps and habit stacking.
We touched briefly on micro steps earlier with the one push-up idea.
Right, but let's look at why it works biologically. When you set a massive goal like, I am going to run for an hour every day, your amygdala, the fear center of your brain, perceives that massive exertion of energy as a threat to your survival.
Wait, really? It sees a jog as a threat?
Yes, it triggers resistance. It literally floods your body with stress hormones to make you want to stay on the couch.
It's trying to protect you from burning all your calories.
Exactly. Microsteps bypass the amygdala's alarm system. If you say, I am just going to put on my running shoes and walk outside for 5 minutes, the amygdala doesn't care. It's too small of a task to trigger the threat response. But once you are outside in your shoes, momentum takes over. You bypass the friction of starting.
It's sneaking past your own security guards. I love that. And what about habit stacking?
Habit stacking is taking advantage of existing neural architecture. In neuroscience, there is a famous saying by Donald Hebb, neurons that fire together wire together.
Okay, neurons that fire together, wire together.
If you want to build a new, fragile habit, you don't just drop it randomly into your chaotic day. You anchor it or stack it directly onto a habit you already do automatically every single day.
Like brushing your teeth or making coffee.
Yes. Let's say Kevin wants to start a daily meditation habit. If he just says, I will meditate at some point today, he will forget. But if he stacks it, he says, immediately after I pour my morning cup of coffee, I will sit in the chair and meditate for 2 minutes.
The act of pouring the coffee literally becomes the trigger, the cue for the meditation.
Exactly. You are grafting a new branch onto a deeply rooted tree. The existing neural pathway of making coffee makes the new pathway of meditation much easier to activate.
Okay, this all sounds incredibly logical. We've got the micro steps, the stacking, the flexible routine. But let's get real for a second.
Sure.
Let's say you do all of this perfectly. You lock your phone in a drawer, you pour your coffee, you sit down at your desk to do your Pomodoro focus block,
Mm-hmm.
and the distraction isn't in the room. There are no notifications. The distraction is inside your own head.
Ah, yes, the internal noise.
It is deafening. You try to focus on the spreadsheet, but your brain is suddenly playing a highlight reel of every awkward thing you said at a party 5 years ago. Or you're suddenly paralyzed by anxiety about a presentation you have to give next month.
It's overwhelming.
It feels like you have 50 browser tabs open in your brain, music is playing loudly from one of them, and you are frantically clicking around trying to figure out which tab has the audio.
That is perhaps the most accurate and terrifying analogy for what Howe refers to as the monkey mind.
The monkey mind.
Yes, the monkey mind is restless. It is constantly swinging from the branches of past regrets over to the branches of future anxieties. It almost never wants to sit still in the present moment.
So if locking my phone in a drawer doesn't stop the monkey, how do I tame it?
This is where we enter section 5 of the framework, mindfulness and emotional discipline.
Now, I know some listeners might roll their eyes at the word mindfulness.
Oh, for sure.
It has been commodified so much. People think it means you need to buy a $300 meditation cushion, burn some sage, and sit cross-legged on a mountain until you achieve enlightenment.
And that is a massive disservice to the actual practice.
Yeah.
In Howe's framework, mindfulness is fiercely practical. It is cognitive training.
Okay.
It is not about shutting down your thoughts or achieving a completely empty mind. Trying to stop your brain from thinking is like trying to stop your heart from beating. It's what the organ is designed to do.
Right. If you try not to think of a pink elephant, you are only thinking of a pink elephant.
Precisely. Mindfulness is simply the practice of observing your thoughts without judgment and without getting swept away by them.
How did that look in practice?
Let's look at how Kevin applied this. He is sitting on his balcony. He is feeling completely overwhelmed by past mistakes and how far behind he feels in life. He sets a timer for just 10 minutes. His goal is just to focus on the physical sensation of breathing in and out.
And of course, within 3 seconds, his monkey mind starts screaming about an email he forgot to send.
Immediately. But here is the critical pivot. Instead of getting frustrated, instead of saying, I am bad at meditating and quitting, he does the actual work of mindfulness.
I'm just what?
He notices the distracting thought. He acknowledges it. And then he gently, but firmly, guides his attention back to his breath.
I love the analogy we were discussing earlier about this. It's like doing a bicep curl, but for your attention span.
That's exactly it.
Every single time your mind wanders off and you consciously pull it back to the present task, you have completed one mental rep.
That is exactly what it is. It is resistance training for your focus. When Kevin started, his attention muscle was weak. He could barely hold focus for 30 seconds. But over weeks of these 10-minute sessions, he built up the neuromuscular endurance to stay present.
And this foundational strength translates directly into the real world, specifically through a technique Howe calls the 5-second pause, which honestly might be the most valuable tool in the entire book.
It is certainly the most applicable under pressure. The 5-second pause is the core of emotional discipline. It is the ability to forcefully insert a gap between a stimulus and your response.
So if the 50 browser tabs are the monkey mind running wild, the 5-second pause is the mute button.
I love that. Think about the biology of stress. When someone harshly criticizes your work or a massive unexpected deadline drops, your amygdala, that primitive fear center, acts like an alarm bell.
Right.
It immediately floods your body with cortisol and adrenaline in milliseconds. It wants you to fight or run. It's a survival reflex.
And in a modern office environment, fighting or running usually involves sending a highly aggressive, emotionally charged email that you will deeply regret the next day.
Exactly. Because your prefrontal cortex, the logical, rational CEO of your brain, operates much slower.
Hmm, interesting.
It takes a few seconds to boot up, analyze the situation, and realize that a passive aggressive Slack message is not actually a saber-toothed tiger. The 5-second pause isn't just a cute psychological trick, it is the literal biological window required for your logic center to come online and pull the plug on the false alarm.
This mechanism literally saves Kevin's career. There is this pivotal scene in his story. A massive high-stakes project gets dropped on his department at the last minute. The deadline is completely unreasonable.
A nightmare scenario.
Total nightmare. And predictably, his entire team loses their minds. They start panicking. They're complaining in the break room. They're running around like their hair is on fire, achieving absolutely nothing but spreading anxiety.
The collective amygdala hijack.
Yes. But Kevin, who has been quietly doing his balcony meditation, who has been doing his attention bicep curls, he feels the panic rising in his chest, but he doesn't react.
He uses the
He
pause.
steps back from his desk, he takes a deep breath, and he forces a 5-second pause.
He creates the gap.
He creates the gap. He lets his prefrontal cortex boot up. And instead of joining the chorus of panic, he sits down, opens a blank document, and calmly breaks the massive, terrifying project down into 10 daily microtasks.
Brilliant.
He delegates 3 of them. He executes the first one, and he completely impresses his boss, not by working 24 hours straight, but by being the only person in the room who stayed grounded when everyone else lost their heads.
That is the ultimate ROI of emotional discipline. It clears the smoke from the room so you can actually make good decisions under extreme pressure.
Okay, this is an incredible victory for Kevin. He's the hero of the office. But, and this is a massive but, what happens when life doesn't play out like a movie script?
Oh, because it won't.
What happens when you do everything right? You meditate, you use the focus map, you execute the 5-second pause,
Hmm.
and you still completely, utterly fall flat on your face.
Because you will. It is a statistical certainty. Failure is not a possibility. It is an inevitability.
And this brings us to the ultimate test of the entire framework. How it calls it the bounce back protocol. Because Kevin's story doesn't end with that one office victory.
No, it doesn't.
A few months later, he faces a monumental failure.
Hmm.
He completely mismanages a different deadline. A major project falls apart. His manager is incredibly angry and disappointed, and Kevin is humiliated. He goes home, sits on his balcony, and he just wants to rip the whiteboard off the wall and throw it in the dumpster.
The urge to quit after a public failure is incredibly strong. Howe identifies this psychological trap as the what the hell effect. Psychologists also refer to it as ego depletion.
The what the hell effect. It's the all or nothing mindset. It's when you are on a strict diet, you accidentally eat one French fry, and your brain says, well, the streak is broken, the day is ruined, what the hell? I might as well eat an entire pizza and give up on the diet entirely.
Exactly. The brain uses the failure as a convenient excuse to stop expending effort and default back to baseline laziness. It is a defense mechanism to protect your ego from further bruising.
But Kevin has read the playbook. He turns to Howe's chapter on learning from failures.
Hmm.
He realizes that a failure isn't a dead-end sign. It is a diagnostic tool. It is raw data.
So instead of wallowing in self-pity or blaming his coworkers, he does something highly constructive. He opens a new section in his notebook and titles it Lessons Learned. He looks at the ruined project completely objectively, like an autopsy.
He asks the hard questions. Why did it fail? Where did the system break down? And he realizes it wasn't because he was a bad person. It was a mechanical failure. He didn't delegate properly, and he lacked regular check-ins with his team to catch errors early.
He shifted from emotional blame to tactical analysis. And in doing so, that massive failure literally transformed into the exact stepping stone he needed for his next success. He patched the vulnerability in his system.
This is the absolute heart of the bounce back protocol. Discipline is not about achieving perfection 365 days a year. Perfection is a myth. True discipline is measured by your recovery time.
Yes. How fast do you bounce back?
Right. If you fail your diet on a Tuesday morning, you do not abandon the entire week. You bounce back and eat a healthy meal on Tuesday afternoon.
That speed of recovery, that resilience, is the defining characteristic that separates the masters from the amateurs. And what is truly fascinating is how seamlessly these exact same principles scale up into leadership.
Right, because discipline isn't just a solo endeavor. How does this apply to managing other people?
We can look at Warwick Long's review of Howe's latest book, How to Be a Great Boss, which was published out of Avondale University. Long suitably points out that Howe encourages leaders to undergo a massive mindset shift, moving from controlling employees to enabling them.
That sounds very counterintuitive to the old school idea of a disciplined boss who just yells and micromanages every detail.
Because micromanagement is actually a symptom of anxiety, not discipline. A truly disciplined leader builds a culture of trust and accountability. If a team member fails, a disciplined boss doesn't throw a tantrum or fire them immediately.
They apply the bounce back protocol.
Exactly. They apply it collectively, they sit down with the team, they run the diagnostic, they extract the lessons, and they build resilience into the organization.
It is taking this intensely personal internal framework and projecting it outward to elevate everyone around you.
Precisely. And when you stack all of this together over time, the micro steps, the quick bounce backs, the focus maps, the emotional pauses, it all culminates in the grand finale of Howe's entire philosophy, the compounding effect.
Okay, the math behind discipline.
Hmm.
When I read this section in the source material, it legitimately shifted my perspective on effort. It is mind blowing.
The math is staggering. We are culturally conditioned to believe that massive success requires massive, sweeping, heroic actions. But Howe reveals that consistency is infinitely more powerful than intensity. The math shows that improving your skills or your output by just 1% every single day equates to roughly a 365% growth over the course of a single year.
Just 1% a day. That is so small, it is almost imperceptible in the moment. It's writing one extra paragraph. It's reading for 10 extra minutes.
It is completely invisible on a day-to-day basis. If you read 10 pages today, you don't look any smarter tomorrow. But over time, the interest compounds exponentially. Think about the reading example. If you use a microstep and commit to reading just 30 minutes a day over the course of a year, depending on your speed, that translates to reading roughly 180 books.
180 books. That is essentially a self-taught PhD. That volume of knowledge fundamentally transforms your entire worldview, your vocabulary, your earning potential, all from just 30 minutes a day.
And that is the ultimate promise of discipline. It creates a compounding interest of self-improvement. Eventually, the friction completely disappears. Success is no longer this distant, exhausting destination that you are desperately running toward. It becomes an automatic byproduct of your daily habits. It just becomes who you are.
Because you did the identity shift right at the very beginning. You stopped pretending, and you simply became a disciplined person. Wow. Okay, we have covered an immense amount of ground today. Let's pull this all together and wrap this up with a crisp, high-yield summary of the exact blueprint we've extracted today.
Here is your roadmap out of the stagnation. First, you must shift your identity. Stop waiting for the spark of motivation and adopt the mindset of be before you do. Second, build your structural foundation using the 3P formula. Anchor your purpose deeply. Outline a granular plan to eliminate decision fatigue and execute through daily dopamine rewarded practice.
Third, protect your environment. Track your internal and external bugs like a scientist using a distraction ledger, and prioritize eating your frogs using the spatial clarity of a focus map.
Fourth, do not let your routine become a prison. Employ structured flexibility. Tame your monkey mind with mindfulness reps and use the 5-second pause to prevent your amygdala from hijacking your logic.
And finally, when you inevitably stumble, deploy the bounce back protocol. Do not wallow in the what the hell effect. Extract the data, adjust the system, and get back to compounding your 1% daily growth.
It is a phenomenal, battle-tested framework for taking back control of your life.
It really is. But before we sign off, I want to look right at you, the listener, and leave you with one final, slightly provocative thought to mull over today.
I love a good paradigm shift. What is it?
People look at discipline and they see a straitjacket. They think it is nothing but harsh alarms, boring routines, strict rules, and absolutely no fun. But I want you to seriously consider the alternative. The person who is a slave to their impulses. The person who is a victim to every single notification that pings on their phone. The person who cannot resist the biological urge to hit the snooze button and continually breaks promises to themselves. Is that person actually free?
That is a profound question. They are trapped by their own immediate desires.
Exactly. True freedom is not having the ability to do whatever you want in a fleeting emotional moment. True freedom is having the structural power and the mental fortitude to finally become whoever you want to be.
I couldn't have said it better myself. The cage is actually the key.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Don't try to change your entire life tomorrow morning. Just pick one thing. Take just one micro step today, check one tiny box. We'll see you next time.